Hello, this is Brian from ScanMD Fire and Rescue Solution. We're going to be doing a demonstration on the G1 pager programming software. This is revision R03.06.23, as can be seen on the top of the software right here. The G1 PPS will program all Unication pagers, the G1, the G1 Plus, the GSM, the GSM Plus. And it's pretty intriguing. We'll go into most of the basic pager programming steps. I'm not going to touch on a lot of the advanced settings in this video. I'm pushing for 15 minutes or less. We'll see if that happens. Once you load the program, you'll get this startup screen. The password's already entered onto the screen for you right here, and you'll come down here and press the login button. Once you're logged in, it'll tell you, what this pager programming software can program, and these are your options right here on the front screen. For this demo, we're going to actually go ahead and pull a code plug file out of memory. We're not going to read one from the computer. So, just to give you a little heads up on the left side of the screen here, you have your user's manual, which if you open this while you have a code plug open, you will lose the data in the program, and you'll have to reopen your code plug. So just keep in mind that if you're halfway through programming a code plug and oops, I need to look at the menu, or the manual rather, you're going to have to save this and then go up here and press on this. That's the same for the COM port settings. You want to have your COM port settings set before you go into the code plug file. This button here, Program Pager with Existing Code Plug File, allows you to open a already saved code plug that you may have received by email or saved from a pager programming prior. This button here, Program Pager with Red Pager Code Plug Data, is going to read the pager from the programming cradle. Now you want to make sure that you have your COM port settings set right, or it will not read the pager. The other nice feature about this programming software is that you can read other voice pagers code plug, and it deciphers the information and kind of gives you a basic interface, if you will, and puts the data into the pager programming software, and then you can edit the alpha tags and whatnot from there. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and open up an existing code plug file. As you can see here, these are a bunch of different pagers that we've sent out. We'll go ahead and use a newer one, so let's go ahead with this gentleman here. Alright, once you double click on that, you'll get your pager information display. This pretty much tells you everything about the pager. Your serial number, the frequency range, and the model. This is a G1 Plus, so this has the Bluetooth feature enabled. Down here, the inventory control number. That's a number that your company can assign. These are demo units that I've sent out, so I just put in demo and my company phone number. Group name could be your department name or station number. For this demo purpose, I have ScanMD demo, and then username, obviously you would put the person using that particular pager, or some type of callback number is what I use for it. It's got my office phone number here. Down here it'll tell you the last programming information. So the last time this was programmed, it was programmed using the current version of the G1 programming software. It gives you code plug version and also the last time that this was programmed into the pager. Go down to the pager configuration settings. Here you get a lot of options, and these are mostly global settings, I guess some people would like to call it. You get the menu timeouts, backlight timeouts. This is how long the backlight or menu will stay active on your pager before it defaults back to the main screen. The pager has different zoom levels. It has a what I like to call zoom out, which is a 4-line display, and then it has zoom in, which is like a 2-line display on the screen. So if you're a little hard of seeing the smaller font, you can definitely make it bigger and easier to read. The contrast is usually pretty good at 5. Some people may want it a little darker or a little lighter, and that's all programmable here. The default zone depending on how many zones you have active, the pager is capable of 8 zones. The default zone determines what the pager should automatically turn on to for the first time after programming. Default squelch level, there's 3 options. There's good RF sensitivity, which will get you more audio, but it might pick up weaker signals and hold open your carrier squelch a little bit. Normal is where I usually leave the pager. And the good voice quality basically makes the pager wait for an absolutely perfect signal before it opens the squelch to hear the call, or the transmission in that matter. I'll go ahead and leave it at normal. For most departments, they use 24-hour time, so I leave this set at 12-hour. However, if you would prefer to have standard 12-hour time, you can choose 12 hours. We're going to leave it for 24 hours for us. The date format, I do month, day, year. Sorry about this. Keytone, I don't like the keytone on, but you can leave it on if you'd like. The auto alarm turn on, this can automatically turn the pager on at a certain time. The screen off feature basically shuts the screen off, so it works just as a regular pager when it's on your hip for more than a certain amount of time. So if you want to save a little bit of energy, you can turn that feature on, and the screen will only come on once you choose to turn the selector knob or choose a button on the front of the pager. Stored voice compress is supposed to save you a little bit of room on your pager. The pager has plenty of storage room. You can turn this on if you'd like. I honestly have not noticed a difference with it, but I have not played with that setting that much. This is your voice message record limit option here. Most departments, 60 seconds should be plenty. It records for as much as your dispatcher talks after the tones are dropped. After the carrier squelch drops for your predetermined amount of time, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, it'll stop recording. So you won't necessarily have 60 seconds of blank audio. If the dispatch message is only 32 seconds long, it's only going to record for 36, 37 seconds. Duplicate text messages. The pager does have a feature where MDC 1200 messages can trigger text alerts to the pager. That's a little bit more of an advanced feature we're not going to go into, but you know, this just says, do you want to get duplicate messages or not? I mean, that's totally up to you guys when you program your pager. Go down to the sequential lockout period. And this is basically going to give you options, you know, 8, 16, 32, 64 seconds. How long does it take before the pager locks when you have the key lock activated? Let's go ahead and go down to the next one, which is going to be the default on-off duty. We usually set it the default as on-duty status, unless you specify when you're programming the pager that you want an off-duty mode. We don't even program an off-duty mode into the pager. That's something you could do, and what that allows you to do with the on-duty off-duty mode is turn your primary tones off but leave your battalion chief tones on, or leave your countywide all-call on and shut off your department tones. That way you're not being awoken in the middle of the night for a call that you don't need to respond on, but you would still get a weather alert from your county or whatnot. Key lock is a nice feature to have on because it does have buttons on the front of this pager. So if you have your key lock on after the time passes for the lockout period, a little padlock will show up on the front of your pager, and to unlock it you would press the center button and the side button sequentially. So you press the center button first and then you press the side button, and that would unlock your pager. Voice prompts, very similar to the other versions of pagers on the market, where it'll say selective call, scan, priority scan. This will give you all the options right up front. And then voice. The pleasing tone settings, these are the customizable tones. as you can see here, this pager was set up with a 28-0, which in turn is basically the Minotaur sound. A lot of people had requested for the pager to sound like a Minotaur because that was an audible alert that they were used to. So pleasing tone 1 is set up to ring like a Minotaur. Pleasing tones 2 through 8 are all different settings for other tunes if they needed something that was a little bit more attention getting for maybe a weather alert or an all call. We're going to go ahead and move down to the call source text prompt setting. And what this is pretty important. Whatever tones you plan on putting into the pager should have an alpha tag, so you can easily decipher which tone's going off when you look at the screen, or when you play a callback, it has an alpha tag assigned to it. So each tone set has an option for an alpha tag. That alpha tag option is in a drop-down form later on in the call ID code setting, but you need to put the text in these boxes here for your different tones. So if you have a tone for Marion Fire, then that's going to go here. You have a tone for Marion EMS, you're going to type in Marion EMS here. If you have an all call or a weather alert, you could put that in here, and so on and so forth. All your tones, all the way down to 64, I believe. It might even be more than that. Yeah, it's like 96. And then your all call prompt. So you have 96 source prompts here. Should be plenty for any department. If it's not, well, you might just have to buy 2 Unication pagers. Moving right along, we're going to go down to the MDC Contact Book settings. This is a more advanced feature. I don't want to really talk about this too much. One, I've never set it up, so I can't really speak from experience on how well it works or how it works. I do plan on playing with this over the next couple of weeks, so I can do another review using some of the MDC settings on the Unication pager, which some people have seemed interested in. Let's go ahead and go down to the next source prompt. I'm sorry. Let's go down to the next zone here. And it's going to be the Call ID Cap Codes tab. This is where you would enter your tones. Up here, you have your tone table list. You have 8 tone tables. Some might ask, why do you need 8 tone tables? Well, using the Unication pager, and any other pager for that matter, the tones have to keep a certain amount of distance from each other. So you can't put tones that are within like 1.5% of another tone in the same tone table if it's not the same as something that's already there. So for example, if your first tone for station 1 at county A is 669.9, and you run in another county that we'll call station 2 on county B, and they run a tone of 675 and something else. Those tones are within 1.5% of each other, and they wouldn't be able to be kept in the same tone table. Therefore, you have multiple tone tables, so you can divide up these tones if you have tones that are too close to each other. Now, that being said, you can only assign 1 tone table per frequency. So we'll go ahead and click on tone table 1 and show you what we have here. Here you'll see that we have the call ID cap code settings and the tone settings table 1. So here we have tone table. This pager is capable of different types of tone settings, so make sure you choose 2-tone or 5-tone accordingly. Most companies that I've dealt with, actually almost all companies I've dealt with the exception of a few out in the West, have 2-tone. So make sure you have 2-tone. Your paging system, there are lots of options here. I would say most companies or most jurisdictions probably use Motorola tone timing, or I'm sorry, tone settings and tone timing. So choose the Motorola paging setting if that's right for you. If it's not, you have options of GE, Plectron, Fast Plectron, Reach, and Fast Reach. One of the main things I've noticed is that Plectron or Fast Plectron have shorter long tone timings. So the rarity of the departments that have single tone dispatches that only last 4 to 5 seconds per tone, you probably want to set this to Plectron or Fast Plectron. It seems to work well. Yeah, let's keep this at Motorola for our purposes here, giving you guys a rundown. Here you're going to see your tone settings. Each tone table is capable of 12 sequential page tones. That's a 1-2 tone or an A-B tone. That's usually 1 second, 3 second, or 1.5 seconds and 1.5 seconds, or however your county might have that set up. It's also capable of 4 long tones per tone table. So here we already have some stuff entered in. Let's just go ahead and click on it so you can see. Once you click on the call ID that you want, also known as Table 1, ID 1, you would be able to type in your tone, or if it makes it easier, you can always click on the list and choose your tone from the group box. Remember where I said up here you would need your source prompts for this part later? Well, here's that drop down menu I was talking about. You have Marion Fire, Marion EMS, and All Call. This was Marion Fire. We made that alert like the Minotaur, which was pleasing tone 1, and the backlight is red for fire. We also noted that it will have stored voice. All these options are programmer selectable if you'd like to change them up. The next tone we have is Marion EMS. Same goes here. We have Marion EMS. It's a blue backlight, it records, and it's got tone 2, so it sounds different than the fire. Once again, I'm not going to talk on the MDC table list here too much. There's a lot of settings that you can do with these guys. You can go in here and enable different things. I have not messed with the MDC yet. I don't want to get into too much detail because I don't want to mislead anybody or send them down the wrong road. And then I have to try to figure out how to get myself out of it. Let's go ahead and go back here. Notice I have 2 tone tables here. Like I was saying, tone tables that are closer together or whatnot. I made a second tone table just for the weather tone because it doesn't follow any Motorola guidelines. And if somebody had a tone of 1047 point something or 1063 point something, it may not go into the same table. So I just like to have the weather tone for the weather channels that you'll see later on set differently. And this will give you the weather alerts on the pager if it's set up properly, which we'll talk about. Go down to the channel parameter settings. Here is where you enter all your channel names and frequencies into the pager. The channel being here does not put it in a channel number on the pager. This is strictly the channel number of the frequency. And then you can assign these channels to the different selector knobs later on in the programming. So you'd want to enter all your frequencies here. It doesn't necessarily matter which order they're in. You're going to have a drop-down list to choose from, just very similar to the source, the call source text prompt settings later on in this demonstration. Notice here that a lot of these frequencies are the same. The reason that this is set up like this is because this particular department runs fire and EMS, and they have a fire tone and an EMS tone. Well, some members may only run EMS when they're on duty at some times, and they may only run fire calls when they're on duty at another time. So we divided up their channels so they could be in a standby mode for just fire, a standby mode for just EMS, a standby mode for fire and EMS, and then obviously when they're monitoring, the pager would display Somerset County, which is the same frequency and the same tones as fire department and EMS. The EMS channel only has EMS tone activation, and the fire channel only has fire tone activation. And I'll show you this here in just a second. Notice that we also have the weather channels, some surrounding counties for this jurisdiction, and some marine channels or Coast Guard channels because they're on the water. Go ahead and double click on the first channel up here. This will bring you to another page. And here you'll see that you have channel 1 selected. And once again, this channel 1 does not mean it's channel 1 on the position on the knob on top of the pager. It's strictly channel 1 in the software here. So it's going to be enabled. You're going to see that it's Marion Fire. you're going to see your bandwidth. I've had a lot of questions about this. 12.5 hertz is narrowband. 25 hertz is wideband. So as long as your county has gone through narrowbanding, which almost all should have, if not, you know who you are, you want to keep this at 12.5 hertz narrowband. Put in their frequency. And then if they have a tone, you can put their tone in. They do not have a tone, so they're going to be CSQ. Now, a tone is a quiet code, or a PL tone, a CTCSS tone, a DPL code, a CDCSS you may have heard of. And this is something so you don't hear skip or traffic on a nearby repeater that uses the same frequency. That's not necessarily something you want to hear. You could enable PL tone very simply by going here, clicking on the CTCSS, and then coming down here and choosing your tone. They do not, so we'll leave that off. Now you notice how I said this was Marion Fire, so their tone activations were only for the fire department. We'll scroll down here a little bit. You'll see the channel settings, their squelch setting, their expander and de-emphasize. I don't use the expander feature, however the de-emphasis feature actually works pretty well. When it's off, there's a noticeable difference in the drop-off of the receiver. Signal tone type is going to be two-tone, and this is where you would choose which tones go off with this particular channel. So remember, we're under Marion Fire, and they only want this to go off for their fire tone. But we know from our call ID codes that call 1 under tone table 1 is the fire, and call 2 under tone table 1 is the EMS. You have some off-duty settings and you have some priority settings here. Basically what these are going to let you do, if you activate, say you had an all-call tone, which they do not have, you could enable the off-duty mode by selecting the all-call tone, and when you're in off-duty mode, that would be the only tone that activated when the pager alerted. Once again, I don't use the off-duty feature because it has so many selector switches on top. You can have a position for off-duty that only listens to the tones you want. However, the off-duty mode is a standard feature on almost all fire pagers, so it was included on the Unication G1 as well. Go down a little further. This would be your MDC settings. Once again, we didn't set up any of the MDC stuff. I haven't really messed with it a lot. But from what I understand, you can be alerted by MDC, which is a data burst, a Motorola data burst. It usually contains like a push-to-talk ID that a lot of conventional radios use if you're using Motorola. From what I understand, you can also set this up to display a canned text message for certain MDC codes, and that's a whole nother ball game I'm not going to get into. So let's go ahead and go back. We'll go in here to another channel. As you can see, the weather channels are 25 hertz because weather is still wideband, and the marine channels are also still wideband. They're not required to switch to narrowband. So as you can see, these are going to be wideband, and your other channels will be narrowband. And the pager can do both. That's not a problem. Some manufacturers have issues with this, where you either have to buy a narrowband pager or you have to buy a wideband pager. Not Unication. You get the best of both worlds here. Go ahead and go back. These are just all the channels. Go down to the next tab here. Your manual scan and relative parameter setting. This could get confusing for someone who hasn't played with the programming software. As you can see here, you get your manual scan list and everything's disabled right now. So let's go ahead and double click on manual scan. I'm sorry, on table 1 of the manual scan. And it brings you up this nice display of information that you're wondering, what the heck is this? So let's go ahead for this training video. Let's go ahead and manual scan enable, turn that on. Now you get scan modes. Your different scan modes are free scan and channel scan. Don't get these confused with like a priority scan or a normal scan or a dual channel scan or any of that such. Channel scan will allow you to scan all 64 channels if you had them programmed with no problem. It might take a few seconds for it to get through the 64 channels while scanning, but you could scan all 64 channels and assign that to a selector position if you'd like. Free scan, scoot down here a little bit, allows you to manually select a frequency from the front of the pager. So you can actually go to your free scan selector setting, which might be on selector switch 8 if you set it up. And once you're on selector switch 8, it will just display a frequency on the screen. You can use the center button, the up and down button on the pager to choose the frequency you want. And this basically lets you choose which frequency range you want them to be able to access. So if everything you need is in 155 megahertz or 154 megahertz, you could set the start frequency as 154.0 and the end frequency as 156. And then the default frequency, put it in the middle. That way you're not scanning through every frequency between 148 and 164 to get to a channel between 154 and 156. That's free scan functionality. It's great for mutual aid support, or if you have to go to an area you haven't been to and you can look up their frequency on your cell phone on your way to the call and put it in. More power to you. It's a great feature, and I have it on my demo pager that I'm currently testing out for Unication, which you guys will see more of in the future. What else is there to talk about on here? These are just settings for the manual scan and how the bandwidth, stuff like that. The tuning step is how many the frequency steps that it wow, I really am at a loss for words. Most of you know what this is. It's not really important. 2.5 hertz will get you pretty much everything you want. If you only want to scan wideband stuff, then you can bring it up a couple of notches, so on and so forth. This is more of an advanced thing, so if you're playing with this, you probably know what you're doing anyhow. Let's go ahead and disable this, and we'll go back. Now, let's go down to scan list parameter settings. This setting field actually lets you choose what channels are going to scan, and then from these channels you'll actually get an option in the portfolio settings that we're going to go to next on if you want it to be a dual channel scan, a normal scan, priority scan, silent scan, and so on and so forth. So as you can see here, we have this one set up with just 2 channels, some are set main and some are set ops. And you can see that if this was to be set up as a priority scan, that it'll check the main channel every little over a second. And you can choose up to 8 channels per scan group. The difference between the scan list and the manual channel scan is that scan lists can scan for tones and alert for tones. When you're in manual channel scan, it does not monitor for tones. It's strictly acting as a scanner. So 90% of people would probably want to keep this in the keep their scan list in this setting so they don't miss a call. Let's go back here. You can see I have the weather set up to scan, and the reason I do this is it works kind of just like a weather radio. It'll scan weather channels 1 through 7, and it will stop on whichever one it gets reception on first. I also have a scan list set up for the marine channels. The exception here is that we have the marine channel set up or the Coast Guard channels. 16 is the nationwide distress channel. 22 and 23 are Coast Guard usage channels. This is what they usually have their operations on when they're doing rescues or whatnot, or talking to another vessel in distress. I also threw in their county main and their county ops, because if they are scanning Coast Guard channels, more than likely they're going on a boat call and they want to hear what's going on. So they should be able to hear their dispatch and their ops channel as well, in my opinion. So these are some of the scan lists. You can do up to 16 scan lists, and they can be a whole variety of different options. You don't even have to have that particular channel set up in the profile for it to scan. So if you wanted to scan Somerset, Maine, Somerset ops, and say you were a security guard at the local mall too, you could put the mall frequency in as long as it was the same frequency range, and you'd be able to scan everything at once. Let's go ahead and move down to the next tab here, which is the receiving portfolio setting. This is where you set up your zones, which this pager is capable of 8 zones of 8 switches each. So zone 1 is our Marion Fire Zone, which is our primary zone. And as you can see down here is what the function switches will do. There's a 1 through 8 position knob on top. So now we're in zone 1, position 1. The way I have this particular pager set up is selective call for fire is in position 1, selective call for EMS is in position 2, selective call for fire and EMS is in position 3. Now for those of you who aren't familiar with programming, like say a Minotaur pager, selective call means that the pager is off per se. It's only listening for tones. Once it hears the assigned tone, the pager will make an alert noise and then open up, and you will hear the call. And it would remain open until you hit the reset button. There are some automatic settings that you can set up, which we'll go into here in a second. But that's basically what selective call is. Let's go ahead and open this up and we'll go through the rest of the settings from this one knob position. Notice here you'll have your function knob. Now this chooses what you're going to do. Either it's not going to be assigned anything, it's going to be selective call, monitor mode, normal scan, priority scan, silent scan, dual channel scan, or free scan. Now let's go over what these do. Selective call I've already explained. Monitor mode puts the pager into a listening state so you can hear what's going on the dispatch channel. It will also alert for calls. Normal scan allows you to choose one of the scan lists we just talked about, and you can assign a scan list. With normal scan, you hear the channels and there's no priority. So with normal scan, if somebody's talking on, say, an operations channel and they're dispatching a call on the dispatch channel, you may miss your dispatch because it's a probability scan and it's going to stop on whoever talks first. Priority scan will always keep channel 1 in your scan list as the priority, and all other channels will be non-priority. So if your priority channel is dispatch and your non-priority channel is your operations channel, it will check back to the dispatch channel whenever you're stuck on your operations channel listening to someone. It will check back on your dispatch channel whatever the predetermined amount of time is set for that scan list, which is what we talked about earlier, which I'll go back to in a little bit and explain because I think I might have missed that. The next option is silent scan. Silent scan can monitor multiple channels that have tones assigned. So if you run with 2 different jurisdictions, or you run for the fire and the EMS and they operate off of 2 different frequencies, you could scan for tones on 2 separate frequencies, and it would only alert once the tones were activated. And then once the call was dispatched, it would remain in a normal scan mode until you press the reset button. The dual channel scan allows you to monitor either a normal dual channel scan or priority dual channel scan any scan list that has 2 frequencies in it. There's really no difference between normal scan and dual channel scan, other than dual channel scan is limited to 2 frequencies. It makes it maybe a little easier to understand that when you switch the selector position to position, let's say 5, it'll say dual channel scan, and maybe you'll know that dual channel scan is your dispatch and your ops channel, whereas normal scan listens to the police, the EMS, the fire dispatch, and the ops channel. But like I said, the the normal scan mode and the dual channel scan mode pretty much operate the same. Other than one can have 8 channels, the other is limited to 2. When we talked about channel scan and free scan, this is how you would choose it for that selector position. If you wanted to set a 64 channel scan group up, you could, up to 64 channels I should say. And then free scan is where you can actually type in your frequency manually. Well, you can scroll to your frequency manually. There's no keypad on the front, or numeric keypad I should say. So this was supposed to be normal scan. Down here, your reference info. When you're in a scan list, it's going to give you options. Which list do you want? It's important to remember what your lists contain. Like 3 was weather, 6 was Coast Guard, 1 was fire, dispatch, and operations. Those are the ones I can remember right now. So we know that our normal scan for list 1, which actually should probably be dual channel scan. Let's go back and figure out what I'm doing. Alright, so this is supposed to be selective call for Marion Fire. Now we got that back right. Please don't mind me. I've been at work all day and now I'm trying to do this video so people have a little better understanding of how this thing programs. Alright. Here, remember when I said dual channel scan could have a priority or normal? This is where you would select that. So I'll show you down a little bit further. Signal detect wait time, I don't really adjust this, but basically what it's going to do is determine if you have a signal or not before it opens the carrier for you to hear. The reset mode, this is user selectable as well as far as programming the pager, or programmer selectable I should say. I would normally use delay and revert, and what this does is it waits 7 seconds or however many seconds you program before it would stop recording a call. It also holds the carrier squelch open that long as well, so it may or may not be the way you want to go. But departments that drop the carrier squelch after tones and then key up again and transmit, if you have this set to automatic or just standard revert, you're probably not going to get your voice recordings. So you definitely want to have this set to delay and revert until you get your system down, and then you can make adjustments from there. Down here in each position, each knob position has other settings. Push to listen will allow you to basically the pager will not open when this is in the yes mode. When yes is selected, the pager, you have to press the reset monitor button on the side of the pager to hear the call. I've heard this called church mode and other modes, but that's basically what it does. It keeps your pager quiet for you unless you want to hear what's going on. This is best used obviously in vibrate mode. Privacy will actually keep the user from ever being able to hear audio, which it's a voice pager that's kind of pointless, so we'll leave that off. Voice storage, obviously we want that on because we want to record the call when it goes out. Now this request for CTCSS or CDCSS, what this does is if you have specified a PL tone or DPL tone in the programming software up here under channel parameter settings, you would be able to enable this particular knob setting to use the PL tone or the DPL tone. In our case, our channels are not using any PL or DPL tone, so we're going to leave this off. And here you can choose your alert mode for that particular knob position. They have a tone, tone only, tone and vibrate, vibrate then alert, vibrate only, or silent. This particular option is user programmable from the front of the pager. The user can choose if it's going to beep, vibrate and beep, vibrate then alert, or only vibrate. by themselves. They do not need the programming software to change that setting. And as you can see, it's pretty much the same all the way down. You just have to set up which each selector knob does. Let's go to that dual channel scan that I was talking about and show you that priority setting. Here you can choose if dual channel scan is going to be a normal or a priority scan. I'm using normal scan for this demonstration. You can set it for priority scan and try it out. It's pretty much whatever you want to do with this pager, it's possible. I'm sure it doesn't make breakfast in bed. However, you can program this pager to do just about anything with your radio frequencies. It has some other settings as well. It has some over-the-air programming controls. I'm not familiar with this at all. The pager program table down here will actually show you everything that's programmed in your pager. Your tones and source prompt IDs. It'll show your frequencies, your bandwidth, and the tones assigned to that frequency or channel. And that's all the way down. You can export this to an Excel spreadsheet, and it's a little easier to see. That's pretty much the G1 pager programming software. There are a ton of features with this pager and the software to program it. I recommend this pager very much so, and I can answer any questions that you may have about the programming software, along with getting you a G1 pager if you're interested in purchasing one or trying one out. Once you have put in all your information to all these fields here, you would go down to the bottom of the screen and hit right pager. And once you hit the right pager, as long as the pager is turned on in the cradle and the cradle is properly connected and drivers loaded to your computer, the pager will program in about 15 seconds. Once you're done with that, you can end the program, and the pager program would go back to the main screen, where you can go ahead and close it when you're done. Once again, I want to thank you for watching this video on the G1 pager programming software from Unication. This is Brian from ScanMD Fire and Rescue Solutions, and our website is scanmdstore.com. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us here at any time, or you can contact Unication at the number up here. Have a great day.